How can I be a conscious, mindful shopper?
The ideal is this. You need to ask yourself what you need and not focus on what you want. We all want a lot of things when it comes to shopping, and we are programmed to be impulsive shoppers, to pick up something based on its perceived value or the fact it's on sale and things like that. But one influencer was like, I take pictures of things that I really, really want, and I look at it for like 3 days. If I still want it, I'll go back to the store and get it. If I don't, I'll just delete it from my phone and never think about it again.
Accessibility to fashion sustainability. Explain what you mean by having access to sustainability.
Manufacturers, again, control sustainable materials, but they only were interested in people who could buy 5 to 10,000 pieces. And again, if it's a sustainable material, it should be available in sustainable amounts, but it's not. So small designers don't have access to sustainable materials because we can't produce at that amount.
Welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues. I'm your host, Ali Horiat. My goal in this program is to educate our audience about various global issues and how we can help. My guest today is Yvette Estime. Yvette started her company, Dirty Celebrity, with her sister after spending 5 years at a Big Brother corporate job all the way through into the pandemic. Very much like myself, one day she left the world that was not for her. She cashed out her 401k. I didn't have a 401k. And within months won the Klarna Initiative, was named Alternative Designer of the Year by Lux Magazine, and was invited to join the Accessories Council. From then on, the awards and recognitions just came flowing for the twin sisters. Dirty Celebrity is now in its third year of business, and Yvette is here to share her vision on a sustainable fashion industry and how we all want to lead the charge. Dirty Celebrity products are made from either deadstock or organic materials, and they manufacture and source locally to reduce emissions from supply and distribution, as well as to ensure everyone is paid fair wages. Hello, Yvette, and welcome to Compassiviste Dialogues.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Let's start with this question. How did you learn or come about sustainability? I mean, one day you're shopping, or people are shopping at Gucci or H&M, and the next day everybody's all crazy about our footprints and sustainability, and they're starting to wonder about labels and is it eco-friendly? Is it organic cotton? Is it not? How did this come about in the world?
Well, I think global warming scared people, and I think the pandemic, being a result of global warming, scared people enough to start thinking about what will happen to us if we continue on this overconsumption attitude. What will happen to the environment, traffic storms, the random illnesses. It doesn't help that monkeypox arrived in New York City, in San Francisco earlier today. That got people scared. And now people are thinking we have to consume less in order to stave off global warming. And I know that they're having a meeting, I think, later on this month. But the point is that we're reaching the point of no return, and people are scared.
Very much so. You're absolutely right. At Compassiviste, we hold overconsumption as one of the main mindset issues of global warming. I mean, it's one thing to tackle the technical and scientific issues of global warming, and it's completely something different to tackle behavior and mindset issues. And you're bang on there with talking about consuming less, and of course we'll get into consuming better as well throughout this call. Now, before we get into that part of the conversation, let's get a little information about yourself, because this plays a role into the breadth and the scope of how many experiences you've had growing up. You're Hispanic, Jamaican, and Irish. And explain to me how you identify with these spaces. I ask because um, I was born in Dubai. I grew up in Europe, and then I did my university education in Canada and in the U.S. And then I lived in Canada for about 20 years of my life, all in all. And then I moved, to I traveled around the world after that for about 5 years when I stopped my corporate life. And now we're based out of London, US, Brazil, India, and other places. So Compassiviste is global, but it comes because I kind of, when people ask me where are you from, I can't give an answer. I can't say I am from this specific place. So I want to know how that relates to you, the different backgrounds.
Culturally, my father's half Hispanic, half Irish. Um, my mom and my dad both immigrated to America in the 70s. So they saw a lot of, the free love kind of ideology movement. And I think that was the first cornerstone, like the behemoth cornerstone of reusing and being creative and things like that. So they brought that aspect of from their own country. I mean, my father's Haitian Dominican descent, my mother's Jamaican. They had already a sense of natural existence. My mom was like, I don't know what polyester is. I don't know what this is. I don't know what that is. And most of the things she wore were very organic in nature, like organic materials, linens, things like that. So
Hmm.
she instilled in us the importance of good quality, using good quality materials. My father, he was a businessman. Yeah. So he knew how to sell. He knew how to sell really, really well. And I feel like that aspect of him is in me, and his name was Eves and my name's Yvette. So I'm actually little Eves, Eves
Yeah.
Jr. That's what he named me. Um, but when it comes to saying where I'm from, I grew up in New York City, um, giant melting pot. I grew up in Spanish Harlem. Um, I moved to Miami when I was 12 years old. Now I'm in New Jersey. I've been everywhere, and I've taken some parts from everywhere I have been from uh, the organic nature of my parents' original Jamaica and Haiti attitude to the kind of grunge and dystopian ideology of New York City, and then the bright, festive colors and sustainable movement, which is still really big in Miami when I was younger, and that's when I first fell in love with thrifting, things like that, in my teens, because I think Miami was leading the charge of sustainability before anyone else was, and they're still really big in sustainability down there. And somebody was telling me that I should go down there, but all those ideas are encapsulated into my business.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah. One of my oldest friends is Haitian, and I know from her and her family, um, sustainability sometimes is also an aspect of a lot of migrants to the US because of the way life goes from where they come. So, in a sense, when I travel to, for example, some of the islands and places, there is a certain respect for nature because they live with nature, they understand nature. Whereas in cities like Chicago, New York, Toronto, you know, we have the largest underground city in Toronto. It's called the Path, and you could just not see sunlight for months at a time. Especially in the winters when it's freezing cold, like in New York. Everybody goes in downtown Toronto. Everybody uses the underground tunnels and systems. I used to not even wear a jacket going from my office to my home because I lived in a building and my office was in another building, and there was a link through the tunnel underneath, and it was always heated. So here you are in negative freezing temperatures, but you're walking around in just your suit, for example, and you don't get that attachment to nature. And also, overconsumption and abundance in places like these giant cities allows you to be wasteful and not have that culture of sustainability and kind of reusability and care for the environment and for your resources. Whereas when I see friends of mine and even my own family, I mean, Dubai now is the glimmer of excess. But when I was born, it was not. There was a lot of sustainability involved. There was a lot of care for the quality and the maintenance of the goods that you had. And today it's just like a throw and buy new everyday culture. So I can appreciate a lot of what you say there. Dirty
I had a
celebrity.
similar,
Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I had a similar upbringing in New York City. When I was growing up there, it wasn't actually as glamorous as it was now. My mom grew up during the summer of Sam, and she was telling me how her and my father had to go home because they were telling them they couldn't be out at certain times at night.
Mm,
Times Square was still pretty much the red light district still. Growing up, it was not a pretty city. So
mhm.
just like when you grew up in Dubai, New York City wasn't pretty, and my mom just wanted to get out. Fast forward, if I tell people that I'm from Spanish Harlem now, they're like, "Oh wow, you live in a ritzy area." It wasn't ritzy, but it is now.
Mm,
So I feel like things kind of circle back, you know.
yeah, I hear you. And
Mhm.
especially about New York, because you're right. I remember New York, as a youngster, you couldn't, Harlem was not a place that had those buildings and the glitz and everything that there was. I mean, projects all over the place. It was dangerous. That's,
Mhm.
some parts were actually dangerous, Harlem, Bronx. But now I see people buy $20 million penthouses and stuff in some of the same areas, and I think to myself, wow, if you were just here 20 years ago, you could have bought the whole block for that price. So
Yeah.
it's a very, very different city right now. I see that, and it's changed a lot. I don't know if I like it, because it's also killed a lot of the vibe that I used to love about places like Soho. And today it's just become this like money oriented, ritzy kind of fabric that doesn't have the same soul that it did when I remember it 20 years ago. Or yeah, but whatever. Things are going the capitalist route, so this is another city that's kind of trending that way. Dirty celebrity. Where did the name come from, and what does it mean to you?
When we were, I wasn't, we were always a celebrity. My sister and I started our first company, Bill Cosby, was like a Beauty for Life, kind of a mostly gemstone jewelry kind of way. Then we moved to Fuchsia, which was an anagram, and that was mostly like high fashion jewelry. We did a lot more sustainable things like that. But when we came to think about dirty celebrity, we wanted something that was more less conservative. How can you say? Fuchsia was very conservative. It was very
Hmm.
more big and bold and out there.
Hmm.
So we googled some fashion terms, some slang fashion terms, and dirty celebrity was one of those terms that meant mixing high, uh, very expensive clothing pieces like Gucci and Prada with fast fashion pieces like H&M. And so and that was called Dirty Celebrity. So the name actually came from a slang term meaning mixing high and low pieces in an outfit.
Okay, cool. I've actually, yeah, you do see that often with celebrities. They'll wear like something super expensive and then kind of mix it with something like you said from H&M or Gap or something like that, and then you see a $5,000 piece with a $20 piece. But if you match
Right.
it well, it looks cool. Now, you we were speaking a little earlier about community and how you're seeing community building essentially now, especially in the US. Let's take that conversation into the sustainability movement. Do you think that the way forward to a sustainable world is going to be government and kind of a dictatorship of mandates, or do you think it has to come from people themselves and changing their mindsets, changing their spiritual values, so to speak, the core of their values, and communities coming together and saying, we want to upgrade our communities to a better life, to a healthier life, in the same way that you said monkeypox arrived now, and all these things are happening. And these are happening because the communities are not, in my perspective, the communities are not together in that sense. Government can, we've seen this happen. I mean, the prohibition era in the US alone, right? I mean, there was more liquor sold then than there was when liquor was available. So does it work? No, it doesn't work. When people want something, drugs today, I mean, cocaine is illegal in the United States. It's flowing in the streets everywhere. I mean, whether you make it legal or illegal, it's just a matter of the difference of price. That's all it is. It doesn't reduce the usage, so to speak. But community, to me, makes a difference, because cleaning up a community comes from the leaders within that community. It doesn't come from the policing of that community. It comes from people making that change. Do you agree with me, or do you think, no, we need 10 police officers in every street telling people, you can't buy this, you got to be more sustainable? What's your take?
There's already a lot of regulation coming out around overreduction in plastic. I mean, France already passed a law where if you purchase plastic clothes, you have to pay a fee. It's already happening when it comes to regulation and sustainability. And I would love to say that if people shop less, brands will reduce less, but that has not been the case at all. Even in New York City, they're trying to increase transparency. They have a fashion law. They're trying to push for transparency in how much these brands are producing. But I'm going to tell you straight, it's going to be the manufacturers. No matter what we buy and how we buy less. I mean, we band together community. I mean, I've been to a lot of clothing swaps in the past couple of months, a lot more than I've been to the bins and things like that. Even if community is driven to be more sustainable, as long as companies still produce too much, it just means that these things are going to go on clearance and be thrown away more by the brand itself than the people who are purchasing them. So there has to be some regulation saying that these manufacturers, because this is where our focus should be, not the consumer, the manufacturers need to give price breaks at lower amounts. Because if you only get a price break, if you buy 10,000 units of something, you're going to buy 10,000 units of something. This is where the problem starts. It starts in the manufacturing. Manufacturers need to give price breaks at a lower amount. Most of them won't even look at somebody who wants only 2,000 units as well. So they're not encouraging brands even to produce less. They're saying you have to produce this much. We'll only make it if you produce this much. And that's where the power is held. That's where regulation needs to start.
Thank you so much for what you just said. You made me so proud of having you on the show right now, because the reason I do this, honestly, the reason I do this is to get these little geniuses, little snippets of genius coming from guests that translate to the public where the issues are, where they can fight for those issues. You said something that basically it is so true, because even in the publishing world, like we have a publishing house, Compassiviste Publishing, and we don't print books. The reason we don't print books is, one, 90% of paper is logged illegally. This is a fact. Two, the books are bound in Bangladesh and other countries that don't have really tight laws for labor, and that's why Dirty Celebrity doesn't produce there and ship them over. Part of the reason is you want fair wages, you want to know your supply chain and everything and who's working. So you need to make it at home where the laws support that. And we thought about that as well. We're like, okay, never mind the environmental issue. What about the human rights issue of the books? Like, you go into bookstores, you go to Amazon, you order a book. Do you know who printed that book? No, you don't know. Now, going to the manufacturing side of things, from the publishing space, that's why 90% of books get burnt or get thrown away, or they get ripped, or they get reused and pulped to make new paper and new books and stuff like that. The reason is, when you go to a printing house and you say, I'd like to print 5,000 copies because really that's what I think will sell. No. You want to print 50,000. Why? Because it's actually cheaper to print 50,000 than it is 5,000, and then you need one more and you're disaster, right? Price-wise. So they force you to be like, yeah, you know what? If I buy the 50,000, then I could sell the book at this price. Now I'm literally tripling my profit margin, right? And like, there's just no way to say no. There's absolutely no way to say no when the manufacturers come at those rates with you, and they promote that. And you're right, they do the same thing there, and then it trickle effects. I came into this conversation one step after you, which is why I love what you just said, because I tell people, please don't go to outlets. Don't shop at outlets. When you shop at outlets, you promote this t-shirt going from the high street store that it started at, dying there, getting a second life at some other space in another store, and then dying there, and then getting its last life at the outlet in your state. And then when it doesn't work there, it goes out of state to another state that is not so fashion forward as New York. And then it goes to, I don't know, Idaho, and it sits in some other store there. And then come all these Targets and all these other stores. And imagine the footprint of all these buildings, all these employees going to work, all the electricity, water, all the stuff, gas that's used for this one t-shirt to eventually sell at even 99 cents. Because there's overproduction, there's over capacity of putting these things out there. So you're so right in what you just said about the laws should not be at restricting people so much, because I also don't see that work. So Canada, UAE, Europe, I've seen all this plastic taxes and stuff, but let's be real. I go to the supermarket, I shop, and I shop 300 euros worth of food, and then they tell me the plastic is going to cost 75 cents.
Say this.
Come on.
We had a plastic bag law, enacted here in New Jersey before anyone else. And people were just stealing the baskets to the point that they stopped producing plastics because they would take the baskets to the car and just drive away, and it was free. It didn't stop people. So they're like, okay, now we have to not, you have to inconvenience people now and not do baskets. And then they had to go and people started changing up cars. It got really ridiculous. It didn't stop smaller companies from still producing plastic bags. It didn't. I mean, if I go to my local bodega, they still put in a plastic bag. There was no incentive for them to switch from plastic bags into providing something that was just as sustainable, but didn't cost the consumer money. And I don't see that incentive coming through. That's what they need to do. They need to give some incentive to the companies to get rid of plastic in a way where it is gone, period. I think I only have one store here that has metal baskets. Only one. It's still, plastics is still around. It's still there. It's not, maybe it's not in a plastic bag, but it's in a plastic cart or a plastic. It's still around.
Yes.
You need incentives for companies to change.
Yeah, you're right. And you know what? I'm so on board with you, because I was with a friend of mine at the grocery store not too long ago, and we're talking about plastics, and I was saying the same thing. I was pushing the cart, and he was walking beside me. We were arguing, and I said, "Look, do you see where my hands are?" He's like, "Yeah." I'm like, "What is that? What is that red bar? What is that made of?" And he's like, "Plastics." And I said, "Exactly. It could just have been metal. It could just have been stainless steel. It's probably even safer with diseases and everything else. But no, it's plastic. So whether we stop the plastic there or here, it's just so much plastic everywhere that it's not helping. We need to really take a look at this from afar and say, what does no plastic look like? Like, as if it never existed. What does that look like? And restart the conversation. But that's where community comes into me. Unless the 10 million people in New York City, think, hey, yes, let's band together and do this. Will it work? I don't know, because I don't see government being able to make those mandates and upset companies like, the big major plastic producers who kind of change government today. I mean, again, we were talking about this. The US is really a corporation. And do you really upset your main shareholders, which are the few people who run the corporation, essentially? That's the issue.
That's why I said there has to be incentive for them to change. It's
Right.
either, if there's no profit and moving away from plastic, they're not going to move away from plastic.
No.
What's an incentive of business to move away from something that's so profitable to them?
More profit. That's the only incentive.
Exactly.
More profit.
Right. So how do you make it? How do you convince them that if they move away from plastic, it'd be more profitable for them? That's the question.
Well, twofold. One, the government can say, based on the tonnage of plastic that your corporation uses annually, we give you tax incentives or subsidization programs for that. That's one. And two, it could be for the consumer in the sense that the more items you purchase that are plastic free, the less the taxation rate on those items. So, if you go into Walmart and you have a shopping cart full of goods, they get taxed at different rates. One can be taxed at the 12% rate, and the other one can be taxed at 4% if it's plastic free. In combining these two methods increases profit for the corporation, reduces cost to the public, and the reduced plastic usage in the world and waste and everything else that it contributes to then helps maybe the government and the nation in becoming healthier. That could be an option. But you're right, it has to come from in a capitalist world that we live in, it cannot come from compassion, because there is no such thing in the corporate world. It's just numbers.
Right. It's profit first, people second.
Yeah.
It's always been that way.
It's not even people second. There's no people second. It's just profit. Because if there was people second,
well, when I say people second, it means I mean that marketing to people. I don't mean actually caring about people.
Yeah, exactly. Now, speaking of people, I think another very important point, and I know you've touched on this because I've done my research on you, is accessibility to fashion sustainability. And that is a term I'm kind of taking from you. Explain what you mean by, having access to sustainability.
Okay, well, here's the problem. Manufacturers, again, control sustainable materials. So if you are not going to buy 10,000 sustainable pieces that they've created sustainable materials, kind of like there was this company who was making like this more organic leather that wasn't leather, was made from mushrooms, but they only were interested in people who could buy 5 to 10,000 pieces. And again, if this is the same material, it should be available in sustainable amounts, but it's not. So small designers don't have access to sustainable materials because we can't produce at that amount, which means that sustainability, when it comes to sustainable materials, the forerunners has to be corporations that already exist. And since they're already making money from plastic materials, what's the incentive for them to switch to sustainable materials, which are more expensive and cut into their profit margin? There isn't. So there has to be a way where a small brand like myself can have access to these materials. But at this point, we don't have access to sustainable materials.
Okay. Solution. What about co-ops? What if you, Dirty Celebrity, and say each of you wants 1,000 pieces, right? And say you want 1,000 pieces, and they're selling at 10,000. If Dirty Celebrity, using the digital world today, the tech that we have available to us today, created a platform where they said all the other people who want to be sustainable in their fashion and their accessories and their production and everything else, come together and let's collectively buy the 10,000 and then reallocate them to the individual spaces. Would that work to kind of give you more access, aside from the issue that it's still overproduction and overcapacitated, and that's not right because it leads to overconsumption. But at the point of being able to be more sustainable, do you think that would work?
The problem is that these manufacturers are gatekeeping. In order to use materials, you have to manufacture with the manufacturer. So you don't get access to the material. You get it to use it to produce a product. And so if you want, so you can't directly just purchase the material straight from them. Oh, I want to purchase like I went to a trade show and one person was offering sustainable fur, but they want 10,000 units of a production material for me to get access to that. And they were like, we have an online store where you buy, a small amount, but that wasn't the sustainable one that they were offering. That was just regular plastic faux fur. I doubt, I wish it would be like, oh, well, we could start a cohort, we get the materials and manufacture somewhere else. But no, they gatekeep it so that you have to manufacture with them and produce a product in order to get your hands on sustainable material.
So, in a nutshell, this is really a mafia. I mean, it's a criminal system, because I look at the environmental damage and deterioration not maybe in the way many people talk about it, but I look at it from a criminal lens. You are directly causing death. I call that criminal. When your intent is that way, because by doing these things, by gatekeeping and by holding things for profit and not allowing things to happen that way, you are causing deterioration in our environment, and that is leading to all these catastrophes. And what just happened in Florida just a month ago or so. I mean, a whole city wiped out. It doesn't exist. So who do you blame for that? Like, you can't call it. And people go to natural disaster. It's not natural. It's human-made disaster. I stopped calling it natural disaster, because natural disaster is kind of like, you look at God and you're like, why, right? But it's not. It's human-made disaster. I need to look at someone in the eyes and say, you did this to me. Like, we need to have a conversation here about what you did. And you're portraying this picture. You're exposing manufacturers, and now I think people can get a better understanding for why things don't work. And then the marketing, right? The marketing is the other evil, where they try to push onto the consumer a lie that the consumer kind of just flows with to feel better. Is there a way to fight this all?
I'm seeing a lot of smaller people come up with sustainable ideologies. There's a banana leather from a small Mexican manufacturer, and they're allowing people to actually buy the materials. So I'm seeing that being more accessible. I knew someone who was doing fish scales instead of reptilian leather, so fish scales. He's also working directly with small brands, but it's still a slow process. And that's why sustainability, or being a sustainable brand, isn't defined at all, which is also something they're looking to do. Like, what does make a brand sustainable? There's no actual definition. And so you have to find other ways to be sustainable, because using sustainable materials is not the way to go when it comes to, you want to be vegan leather, which is plastic, and other opportunities where you may be able to use things that are not made from plastic or gate kept. Then you have to understand that, the other thing you can do is use natural materials like leather. But then, of course, you also know that leather itself is very not environmental friendly. And even though you use leather as a byproduct of the meatpacking district, it's still going to come with negative connotations. So you're stuck saying that, okay, maybe I won't use leather, but I'll use organic materials. Well, that inflates the price of your products, because organic materials are not only hard to get in America, but they're also very expensive, and you can't pass that price on to consumer, because the consumer doesn't want to pay a high price for a brand they are not as well known. I mean, they will buy a Gucci linen suit, but they're not going to buy a linen handbag from a small brand like myself, charging $300 to $400 $500, because I don't have access to make a huge amount of these linen bags. And so, conceptual wise, affordable sustainability doesn't really exist. Because in order for sustainability to be affordable, it has to be mass produced, and that's not sustainable. The point is how to you talk to the consumer, produce value in your pieces, and disconnect it from them thinking that value is determined by a brand's name and
Mhm.
reputation and not by their own concept of what is valued to them.
So, in a sense, wipe my mind from associating my happiness and my success and everything with the Birkin bag and realign it with the values that really promote a healthier environment with scientific discussions with people like yourself, in a sense, that can explain to me that there is value in this bag because of the quality of the products, the quality of the work, and the production, and the fact that it's timeless and it can stay for a long time without having to change it every season because the color changed for the next season. And that's essentially a mindset shift that you are advocating for. You want people to reassess how they value um, things.
Yeah, I want people to think when it comes to value, to identify what their personal values are and think about how to represent that on their purchase instead of assuming that the purchase itself holds value based on the brand's name or a false sense of community built by following a trend that's going to go away next 3 months and you're chasing inclusion, which is I call it chasing inclusion because
Because
you're chasing the idea that an item can connect you with people when it can't, because what we share with people is our own personal likes and dislikes and things like that. I mean, we could say that MAGA's connection was a hat, but really, most likely, it was connection of beliefs within these people that was stronger than the hat itself. When we think about building community, we have to think about curating a sense of values that we all can share that is not based on what we wear or what we buy.
and that really takes you back. I mean, for the audience, imagine, you know, well, maybe not most of the audience, but if you are well traveled, or if you you know study the rest of the world outside of your own community, you'll notice, for example, in the Middle East, where I grew up, men wear a white robe. Okay, and in most parts of Africa too, they just wear one robe, and it's very plain. It's very sustainable. The fabrics are natural, and there isn't much stitching or buttons or anything that goes into these robes. It's just a slip-on, kind of like a nightgown kind of thing, right? And for centuries, from the time clothing started till about a decade ago, I would say this was the norm for people. Everybody wore this. You still see it today. I mean, in places like Dubai, Doha, in the Middle East. But then at that point, you were connected to your community by communal values. There was the matters of trustworthiness, being a good person, being a compassionate person, being a philanthropic person in your community, being a spiritual person in your community. Those were values that mattered and that connected people together. Now it's, you sit at a cafe and the watch that you're wearing starts a conversation and attracts people to communicate with you and want to associate with you because you're wearing a watch that is literally over $1 million and limited to how many pieces, and you have to be somebody so important to be able to have access to this. And social media really explodes this because there are people walking up to people. I remember when I was in the finance world, I was one of those people. I'm not ashamed of it, because I think when people learn, educate themselves, grow, repent in the sense of you're sinning against your community and against the world, and you make that change, it should be acceptable and noted. But I used to be the guy driving those cars and wearing those clothes and, you know, uh, being called into Gucci before they put the stuff out. But and I did all these stupidities. I did all these shoppings. I'm not gonna lie. I fell for all of these. I felt important. I felt part of a community. And when I went there and I saw so and so and so and so there, it was kind of like, oh, we're part of this special community. I get invited from Toronto to New York for a fashion show, all paid for and everything, because I'm a special client, right? You get sucked into these things, unfortunately,
Hmm.
and I feel really stupid that I did. But the reality is, you're right. We need to come to a place where um, we're not speaking or trying to be included, as you mentioned, by what we wear, right? I mean, that red sole on your Louboutin heels shouldn't be your a woman's kind of entry into, look, I made it, I'm there, I'm valuable, I have a brain. Because if I didn't have a brain, I couldn't buy these $1,000 shoes. So please start respecting me because look at my shoes. It shouldn't be that way. We should have other ways of imposing our cultures, ourselves, our beliefs, our values, and our intelligence onto people, and kind of building those friendships and communities, as opposed to doing it through clothing. And that's where I think we went wrong. If we can go back to a time where the clothing was an expression of ourself and the art of our fashion, as opposed to just blindly following a brand because it gives you that value, that's really where fashion sits for me. Is that how you see it?
Um, like you, when I moved back here about 12 years ago, I ran to every sample cell that I could go to, and I didn't make extravagant purchases, but I did make purchases based on how I want people to perceive me. Now I'm more interested in realizing that who I am and my purpose is dictated not by what I wear, but what I say and how I present myself. I think really when it comes to, especially the current atmosphere, certain groups have been marginalized and things like that. Clothing has and accessories have become what I would say a silent way to ask for respect. You wore designer pieces saying that you deserve more respect for someone else who was a person of color because you made more money. And so, that being said, that is where sustainability needs to take the mind shift. We need to ask for people to respect us based on what we offer to the world and not based on what we wear. And that means we have to find a way to move away from racist rhetoric, outdated ideas, conservative beliefs, and start seeing people as individuals, and it being okay for us all to coexist based on our beliefs. Because right now, we have to find a place, a way to belong to each other based on trends. And I've seen a mind shift now, especially with TikTok and our community building, where people are like, well, you voted for, conservative ideology, then you're not my friend anymore. There is a shift where people are saying, if you don't share my values, we're not friends. That kind of ideology is something we need to shift away from, because it shows that people are finally saying that I don't care about what you're wearing and we're in the same friend group or whatever. If your values are different, then we're not friends. This is where we need to be. We need to say our values dictate who we are and not what we wear.
And in that sense, you know, your fashion should be an extension of your values and who you are, and not of the trends that exist. And then in this way, you're saying sustainability in clothing and fashion and accessorizing and in presentation, essentially sustainability becomes the equalizer that diminishes status, racism, and all the other issues that we can inflict through these kind of ways. Because unfortunately, um, I'll tell you this: a lot of people from marginalized communities, and I can tell you in LA, in the Hispanic community, in the Mexican community, and all, um, there are a lot of people who try to upgrade their clothing wardrobe just to be included in a different status stage. So, I have friends who will fork money out to wear those clothes, dress their kids in those clothes, and associate them and make them friends with other people that they value as higher status, and try to move into those neighborhoods and try to mingle in those ways. All of this is fashion to me, because they want to be included or stamped as, you are the successful white person. And that is the culture of fashion, right? That is what fashion is saying you want to be the successful white person. Because even you look at some of the minorities, people don't I don't know why people don't see this, but the Kardashian sisters, the three of them, they are a minority race. They're Armenian. They're not, white American, generationally. So, but they've bought into that, and then with the Jenners adding on, it became a more of a, we're white culture, and so people look up to that, and the clothing and the fashion and all these things, and it kind of guides people to that direction. And then I tell them a lot of these things are racially driven as well, because I work with the Maasai in Africa. And I remember a time where a Land Rover or even Louis Vuitton with Pharrell Williams, I mean, of all people, came down there, abused these people, and left. They took their fashion, they took their style, they did the whole campaign for Louis Vuitton. Land Rover did their whole campaign. Not a penny went to these people. I was there, not a penny went to these people. To the point that people I know took them to London to get some IP registered for them, so people can't steal their identity anymore, right? This is their identity that's being stolen. And that's the point we're at. But this is what it is. Fashion has become a way of suppressing and further marginalizing people. And I love that you say sustainability in fashion and understanding your values and expressing yourself from your values instead of the will to be included is the way that we can rebalance these conflicting issues in society. Genius,
Exactly.
Yvette, genius. You need a much bigger platform. You should be somewhere really, really, really big, and bring those thoughts to people. I hope a lot of the audience kind of start reflecting on a much, much deeper scale about the things you're saying, because um, yeah, it's eye-opening. Now, let me ask you a couple of questions. I know you're starting an affiliate program to Dirty Celebrity. What is that?
Yes. So basically, we're looking for influencers that share our belief that there should be personal values attached to their clothes. And when I say that, Dirty Celebrity's um, whole set of values is being creative, being original, and also having quality. And we're looking for influencers who can interpret that with their own personal style and show people that being having your own personal style is its own sense of value. I guess to say that what you wear should reflect who you are, and that's what we want. And with the affiliate program, you get 20% of sales for anything that you showcase, and you get a sale for your celebrity. So that's what our program is for.
Okay. So you're taking this, like I said, you need a bigger platform. So you're actually doing what, I thought you should be doing, is taking your ideas and your knowledge and all of these things that you're saying here right now, and trying to promote those more globally, and through many more people like myself, to kind of get people rethinking fashion, get people rethinking sustainability. Great. So I'm going to try to get as many influencers to get in touch with you, because I know a few in this space, and try to get them involved with you, because I really, really believe in the things that you're saying. Very powerful things you're saying. Now, I know the audience will want an answer to this question, and that is why I left it to the end, so it can be, part of the parting questions that stays in their mind. Simple. How can I be a conscious, mindful shopper? Give us a lesson.
This is interesting. I'm seeing a lot of sales going right now. JCPenney has this $3 sale right now. I mean, I've seen for 21 come out with their $5 or less sale. The ideal is this: you need to ask yourself what you need and not focus on what you want. We all want a lot of things when it comes to shopping, and we are programmed to be impulsive shoppers, to pick up something based on its perceived value or the fact it's on sale and things like that. But one person said, one influencer was like, I take pictures of things that I really, really want, and I look at it for like 3 days. If I still want it, I'll go back to the store and get it. If I don't, I'll just delete it from my phone and never think about it again. The idea here is to have some kind of concept of what you need. Go through your closet, see if there's any holes in what you have now that you need to fill. Focus on staples. A lot of people don't have staples, tank tops, things like that. And then one signature piece that you feel represents who you are should be something that you buy for the season. But don't overconsume based on what something's on sale or not, because you will always end up not wearing it. So it's just a think before you buy kind of mindset, and then that's how you can finally become more conscious of what you actually purchase.
Yeah, and a lot of times I find that impulsive or price influence really creates that unnecessary shopping, because um, especially with and here this whole conversation is really about the developed world, and so much so in or I would say the wealthier communities, because there are places in the world right now, and I've traveled and I've lived in some of those places, where people are really concerned about making it from today to tomorrow, and I really mean that, making it from one day to the next. So these conversations about looking through your closet and wardrobe and all, if you're listening to this and you feel like you're learning something, first of all, feel blessed that you have this problem of being able to shift to a sustainable human, or to be able to have these thoughts, because you know uh, more than half of the world don't have this problem. They actually don't have choice. They don't go out shopping. They live, in under $2 a day for most of these spaces. So this is really a privilege conversation we're having here. I really want to put that out there in the beginning of everything. But also, in your privilege, be responsible, because the more your privilege is irresponsible, the more we are supporting the destruction of the rest of the world, and not just humans, but all these animal species that we've seen the greatest extinction of animals in our generation, in our lifetime, and the reason is, again, overconsumption. So like you said, think twice, look through your stuff, make sure you need, not you want. If you have to wear that black dress twice, it's okay. You don't need to, and don't do these things like, white party, yellow party, or orange, because then I have to, right? You invite me and I come with my one suit. It's not going to work. I have to go and buy a yellow suit. Where am I going to wear a yellow suit ever again? Never. But I have to buy it for that one event. So don't do these things either. Like, just be a little smarter with your sustainability and your decisions all the time. How do people interact with you? I mean, how do you just said your program, your affiliate program, for example, or even just people listening here who want to learn more, or who want to interact with you, or want to know what you do and how to shop with you and how to be more sustainable. How do people get in touch with you?
Well, we're on Instagram, dirty_celebrity. We have our own website, shop30celeb.com. And then, of course, if you're interested in being in our affiliate program, you could just email us at info@shop30celeb.com.
Okay, those are easy. Dirty Celebrity all across, and we'll have those links down so people can click on them. Last question before I let you go, Yvette. Um, Overconsumption. Do you think this is the overarching umbrella problem of the world today?
Overproduction actually is the overwhelming problem of the world today. Um, and then secondly, I think it's overusing our resources. And that's, of course, an umbrella underneath overproduction is that we are depleting our resources faster than they can be replaced. Eventually, there'll be no more groundwater eventually, and that was set in place. If we had a drought and the water on surface was gone, then we'll have that. But Coca-Cola and other companies are just taking it out and selling it back to us. We have to find, so those are the two archings that we have to do. But overproduction is the cause, overconsumption. There, I guess, is flip coin, possibly, as long as we overproduce, we have to convince people to overconsume. And so we have to stop with overproduction first, because companies will still always teach you to overconsume. And even if we stop overconsuming, it only means that the things that they produce is going to go straight to landfill because it's not going to go into your closet. And most of the products that are overproduced end up in these small countries where you're talking about, where people don't have, who live on $2 a day, but also now they have to worry about plastic leaching into their environment and things like that, because they can become the garbage places for overconsumption of the Western world.
Now, is there a way, if we can't convince the corporations, because the thing with me is I look at corporations in two ways. I look at one way, there's no soul in a corporation because there's no, although corporations are essentially a bunch of humans who go to work at one location and function as that corporation. It's an ecosystem. This ecosystem does not have a soul because it is mandated by its law to maximize profit. That is the one law that it has to stand by. Nothing else can come in the way of that one goal, to maximize profit. Maximizing profit means at any cost, which means you shouldn't have a soul. And that's when you become a giant, because you didn't have a soul. You know, the people who cared, the corporations who cared, they either went bankrupt or they're not doing so well. It's the ones who really don't care who, get up there. So in that sense, there isn't really talking to these corporations. Now, we can fight back with not consuming, but as you say, there will be overproduction that goes directly to landfills. And I'm assuming, the only way would be in the long run of not consuming their products. These corporations may shift their values in the sense that, we take Coca-Cola. If everybody stops drinking Coca-Cola, Coca-Cola is going to still make Coca-Cola. Why? Because it has the money to make Coca-Cola. But eventually, if nobody's drinking Coca-Cola for 10 years, what is Coca-Cola going to do? It's going to say, we're running out of our own resources, which is money, to keep throwing these Coca-Cola cans into landfills. So now what do we have to do? We have to see what the public wants so that our distillery or our bottling company doesn't go out of business and we have to shut down forever. Instead, we can shift from this toxic drink to good quality water, for example, right? And we're going to rebottle Coca-Cola as a clean water bottling company that is fully sustainable. And then we will again mass produce that to the public. Do you think that is a viable option, that we may be able to bring people together to that extent?
Well, you're thinking what you're saying, it has to be a global scale.
Yes.
It has to be a global consciousness. And right now, there's always going to be a country where it's going to be like, we don't care. And then there's going to be a country that says we do. As long as they have an ability to, sell their product somewhere else, they're going to still make that profit. The issue is that smaller corporations, people like mine, we don't have that option. We have to we have to set and think about the people's mindsets right away. And I also wanted to point out that I'm talking about making horrible drinks and things like that, but there are regulations in other countries that makes Coca-Cola actually have to think about how they produce that isn't here in America. So even though we're not like, oh, regulation doesn't help, it does help in a sense because the quality of food that Europe has isn't the same quality of food we have here, where we have almost zero regulation when it comes to food. That being said, when we think about sustainability, we need regulations because if even if we all don't have the same global mind shift, if government's like, well, you know what, you can't do this, then there's still going to be a shift, even if we all collectively say we're not buying their products, or certain people say you're not buying their products, but other people do buy their products. And what I'm saying is that a global shift can't do this alone. We can't change corporate behavior alone.
We as consumers, but what about we as the consumers who are going to vote the governments into place with this mindset? I mean, think about if let's just assume let's get fantastical for a moment and go into fantasy world. Okay, in fantasy world you have to have a good imagination if you're in fashion. Okay, so I know you do, so go into that imagination of yours and play along with me. We the people come together, we band together, and we say sustainability first. Then we elect a government that says yes, sustainability first. That government comes into play. It is part of us. It is an extension of us. That government says, we don't care about your bribes. We don't care how much you're contributing to my, retirement as the president, or giving me all these gifts. I don't care for all that. There's no corruption here. Sustainability first, because they're upstanding governmental people. They're upstanding politicians, right? And so these people say, no more Coca-Cola, shut down or change your ways. And the public says, yes, we're only buying quality products. Then you believe it will work in this fantasy world, that we will make those shifts and have the Disney ending and live happily ever after.
I would say there is some, in reality, yes, that probably would work. I mean, when I think of Bolivia, they just elected their first Democratic president. And by the way, usually the United States would step in and probably, push in some kind of more oppressive regime. So it was very interesting that he was elected. And the first thing he did was talk against Palestine, but also he has decided to create a more environmentally friendly country, and also think about how to trickle wealth down to those poor citizens. So even though I know that you gave a fantasy description, I'm seeing it play out in real life in Bolivia, where they've elected somebody who cares about the environment and who cares about humanity, spoke up against Palestine, and is really giving corporations a run for their money to protect the environment. So it is happening in certain places already in real life, in real time, but not at the pace it needs to happen.
Right. And not at the scale either, because again, Bolivia, I don't know how, you're right. I don't know how they escaped, with this election, because Venezuela went through the same thing at the same time, and look, they didn't get away with it, right? I mean, the same warlord came back, and everything's back to normal.
Yeah,
We're talking about
exactly.
one of the richest countries in the world. When you talk about Qatar or UAE with their oil and gas and tourism, Venezuela has roughly the same amount of oil. It has like the biggest gold deposits in the world. It's a tiny country with a tiny population, and everybody's in poverty. I've been there. Everybody's in poverty. And then you got 5 people who are living like gods. So, this is how it is. This is how the real world is, unfortunately. And you're right. Bolivia made that change. Brazil, they went from Bolsonaro to the new government, and you're seeing, drastic changes environmentally, especially in the forest regions and all of that, in the rainforest. But the thing is, we cannot we cannot will countries like Bolivia and, for example, Tanzania to make those changes, and then here comes China and USA and bulldozes over all of those, because we're not going to see change that way. You can't have a fair fight that way, right? We need places like China, USA, Canada, the UK, the EU government combined to mandate these changes and those people to stand up for there to be change.
Mhm.
So my fantasy is, yes, my fantasy is one day, that's the fantasy, that I live, that I want to manifest into reality, is one day through a collective of Compassiviste, we can ignite these conversations through people like yourself and everybody else to kind of bridge people together, connect them, and say, hey, we're ready for that change. And then, before we can't have these conversations anymore, before we're really having conversations about which flight to Mars am I on, and I don't want to have those
Mhm.
conversations.
Right. I mean, we want to believe that BRICS and and the African alliance that's going on right now will change. And they're trying to remove the U.S. dollar has the
Yes.
world currency right now. Um, we all want to vote and root for them because we do need a shift of values, and really much the people who are hoarding resources right now, the big seven, are not trickling it down to everyone else. They're hoarding the resources and they are monopolizing it in a way where people who actually own resources are not benefiting at all from giving those resources to them. It's and there has to be a shift in that too.
Yeah. And there's no sovereignty in that either, because I'll tell you, a lot of people look at the Middle East and they see a bunch of very wealthy countries, but what they don't see is underneath the wealth of these countries, there is a subservience to the global powers. Because if the USA one day decides to, be sour with Qatar, it doesn't matter how much oil or gas Qatar has. It's going to be a lot of problems there. And we've seen it play out in the two Gulf wars that there were between Iraq and Kuwait, and how it affected the whole region. So it's a split of a second decision for you know the superpowers to affect the world. And that's why my focus is in this region, in North America and Europe, because I think that's where the change needs to happen. When I go to Africa, when I go to Iraq, when I go to places of where people are really trying to make it from day one to day two, I can't sit there and tell them, you better not buy plastic T-shirts. Dude, that's all there is. They tell me, Ali, there's only two T-shirts. There's black plastic and white plastic. That's my only option. So I can't talk to them. But I can come to the North and say, what you're doing to humanity, what you're doing to, about at least 5 billion people, is a crime. We need to change that. So thank you for bringing this perspective to the show, really.
Well, thank you for having me, and I had a very pointed conversation. I hope I do at least change some people's perspective and what they value, and think more about their purchases, because it's not just our closet; it's the world's closet.
Yes,
you know.
you're absolutely right. Yvette Estime, people, remember that name. Thank you for speaking on Compassiviste Dialogues, and thank you for taking action and participating in directing the world to sustainability and influencing this progress through your passion, your work, what you say, how you act, and actually living it, not just preaching it. And when I say this, I really mean it. You are a model compassivist, because being a compassivist only means that you act on compassion and not hold the emotion idly. So if you and I walk past certain streets in New York, and we see homeless people sitting there, we may even cry together. We may hug each other and cry and walk along. But that homeless person is still homeless, and they're still hungry, and they're still in need of support. So compassion as an emotion is not the way it was meant to be displayed to the world. When and not to be religious, but just as an example, when Jesus was acting compassionately, he was acting compassionately. He was not talking compassionately. When Martin Luther King came and said, we need change, he didn't say, let me write a book about it and sign autographs for you guys. No. Right? Am I right? He went out there and he actually acted on the compassion of the suffering that he saw. So in all of those examples, you take any of those examples and people act on compassion, and you here are acting by actually, putting your work and your passion and everything and your education and your knowledge of these things into a space where you're telling people, hey, listen to me and look at the world from this perspective. We need to make a change and we need to make the world a better place. So, welcome to the club, Yvette. Now, to our audience, please subscribe to Compassiviste Dialogues and share this episode. And share with all your friends. Share with the ones who shop most. Share it with the ones with the most Amazon hauls. Follow us on social media and Dirty Celebrities at dirty_celebrity. All links to Yvette Estime, Dirty Celebrity, and Compassiviste are listed below, so you can interact with her. And all I gotta say is I learned a lot from this, so I hope everybody did. We're here to help change the world together. I'm Ali Horiat.